Three cops sit on the defendant's bench, cracking quiet jokes. Their uniforms are gone, replaced by stiff suits and guarded stares. This isn't the street. This is a courtroom in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. They don't know who she is. They just see a black woman walking in alone, heels sharp against the cold marble floor. They smirk. One of them leans over and whispers something under his breath. The others chuckle. But here's what they don't know. She's not a clerk. She's not a witness. She's the new Attorney General, and she didn't come to play. This is the story of how a room full of arrogance collapsed in the span of one hearing. It started like any other criminal court session in Fulton County. Gray morning, drizzle outside, too many cases on the docket. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed low, and the mood was the usual cocktail of tension and boredom. The case was small on paper, excessive force during a traffic stop. 3 officers, Ryan McConnell, Darren Briggs, and Thomas Vale. All white. All former members of a special enforcement unit under internal review. The victim? A 19-year-old kid with a fractured wrist and no prior record. The video footage was grainy, but the audio was clear. Shouting, threats, a scream, and the dull thud of a baton hitting bone. Still, the defense had confidence. This wasn't their first time in court. Their lawyer, Franklin Gable, had a reputation. Slick suits, slippery arguments, and a way of twisting narratives until juries got dizzy. When the woman walked in, she didn't look like a prosecutor. She wore a tailored black blazer, no badge, no entourage. She held a manila folder and a steel expression. The room didn't turn for her, but the officers noticed. Briggs elbowed Vale. "Witness or intern?" he muttered. "Maybe the kid's social worker." Vale smirked. McConnell rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Another one playing hero." They laughed, not loudly, but enough. She didn't react. She sat quietly in the back, right side of the room, just behind the prosecutor's bench. She opened the folder slowly, scanned a few pages, and then waited. Eyes forward, unbothered. Judge Keller walked in, grey-haired and tired-looking, but sharp as ever. Court was in session. The prosecutor assigned to the case, Assistant DA Mark Ellis, began his opening. Dry, methodical. He didn't light the room on fire, but he laid out the bones, timeline, incident report, use of force protocol. The defense followed with the usual. Confusion at the scene, suspect resisted, procedures followed to the letter. It was shaping up to be another procedural tug-of-war, until Judge Keller leaned toward his mic. "There is a matter to address before we proceed with witness examination," he said. A pause. He looked past the prosecutor, directly toward the woman in the back. "I've just been informed of a personnel update relevant to this case. Would the Attorney General-elect please rise?" The silence in the room cracked like a lightning strike. Briggs blinked. McConnell sat up straight. Vale stopped smiling. The woman stood, calm. She tucked the folder under one arm and walked toward the front, heels slicing through the thick silence like a blade. She nodded at the judge. "Good morning, Your Honor. As of this morning, I've officially accepted the appointment as Georgia's Attorney General, and while I am not here to intervene directly in this case, I did request to observe it for a reason." The room held its breath. She turned slowly, faced the defendants. "Because cases like this one are why I took this job in the first place." McConnell's jaw tightened. Briggs looked away. Vale seemed frozen. Judge Keller gave a slow, deliberate nod. "You may continue, Ms. Navarro." Her name was Elise Navarro, 41, born and raised in Savannah, Harvard Law, 10 years as a federal prosecutor, a reputation for being relentless but not performative. She didn't shout. She didn't grandstand. She didn't need to. What she did next wasn't loud, but it was loud enough. "I've reviewed the full internal affairs file for this case," she said, "and several documents were omitted from discovery. These documents will be forwarded to the court and the defense immediately. In them you'll find complaints, 7 of them, filed against these officers within the past 2 years, all with similar patterns, all dismissed quietly." Franklin Gable's jaw clenched. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a—" But Judge Keller held up a hand. "You'll have your chance, Mr. Gable, but I want to see those files." The courtroom buzzed. The energy had flipped. Navarro continued, her voice calm but razor-edged. I'm not here to replace the prosecutor, nor interfere with this court's independence. But I am here to ensure that this office, moving forward, operates with full transparency, and that patterns of misconduct are not treated as isolated events. She handed the folder to Ellis and stepped back, but before sitting down, she locked eyes with the defendants one last time. No one in this room is above accountability, especially not the ones who wear a badge. Then she returned to her seat. The officers sat motionless, and the courtroom, once casual and cocky, was dead still, because now they knew. They hadn't mocked a witness. They'd mocked the person now in charge of everything they once took for granted, and she wasn't there to play nice. But that was just the beginning. What Elise Navarro uncovered next would do more than embarrass 3 disgraced cops. It would shake the very ground under an entire department. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button, because in part 2, this story goes from courtroom drama to full-blown reckoning. The courtroom was no longer on autopilot. Something had shifted. Elise Navarro didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence did the work. But what no one knew, not even the judge, was that what she'd brought to court that day was only a fraction of what she had uncovered. That night, Navarro returned to her temporary office, a bare-bones setup just a few blocks away from the Capitol. She wasn't officially sworn in yet, but the powers of the office had already been transferred. She was alone, surrounded by open files, printouts, old reports from internal affairs, and a pattern that looked less like a coincidence and more like a system. 7 complaints? Try 24. Different victims, same 3 officers, same excuses. Same signatures of dismissal, some by the same supervisor, a Lieutenant Harlan Gates. She picked up the phone. "Tracy," she said, speaking to her lead investigator, "I want everything. Full IA logs, personnel files, audio logs, and I want them before morning." By the time the second day of trial began, Elise Navarro was back in court. This time, she didn't wait in the back. She sat directly behind the prosecution, folder closed, eyes locked forward. And the defendants, McConnell, Briggs, Vale, they didn't crack a single smile. But things were about to get worse for them. Mark Ellis stood and handed the judge a new set of documents. "Your Honor," he said, "per the request of the Attorney General-elect, we've reviewed additional files previously undisclosed. These include internal reports and unofficial complaint summaries that strongly suggest a suppression of evidence by departmental leadership." Judge Keller raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly are we looking at?" Navarro spoke again, this time from her seat, her voice steady. "A documented pattern of misconduct covered up by a superior officer," she said, "one who's been promoted 3 times in the last 5 years. She placed a single photograph on the evidence table. Lieutenant Gates, smiling, ceremony, medals on his chest, and who happens to be the direct supervisor of all 3 defendants. That moment cracked the case wide open. Suddenly the trial wasn't just about a fractured wrist. It was about a structure, a ladder of silence. The courtroom was no longer focused on 3 men. It was staring down the possibility of a network built to protect them. The defense panicked. Gable objected, begged for delay, claimed ambush. But the judge, a man who had seen decades of backroom politics, was already flipping through the files Navarro had submitted. "These aren't just complaints," Keller said. "These are patterns, identical wording, identical handwriting, overlapping timestamps." He turned to the defense table. "Counsel, your clients are now under suspicion not only for misconduct, but for coordinated concealment of prior incidents." The air left the room. McConnell swallowed hard. His face had gone pale. Briggs leaned back, blinking in disbelief. Vale, the one who smirked the most on day 1, was now trembling visibly. Outside the courthouse, word was spreading. Navarro hadn't made any public statements. She hadn't needed to. The story was walking itself out of the courtroom, tweet by tweet, name by name. Inside her office, Tracy arrived with more files, but there was something else, a flash drive. "Anonymous drop," she said. "No name, no note, but you need to see what's on it." Navarro plugged it in, opened a folder labeled simply Gates. What she saw made her sit still for a full minute. Bodycam footage, 3 angles, a different case. Different victim, same pattern. One officer yelled, another struck. The third turned his camera away. And in the audio, clear as day, Lieutenant Gates himself was present. "Clean it up. Write it straight. I'll take care of the file." It wasn't a rumor anymore, it was policy, unspoken but enforced. Back in court, Navarro requested a closed meeting in chambers. Judge Keller allowed it. Inside, it was just Navarro, the judge, and the court clerk. "Your Honor, this case is no longer about 3 officers," she said. "It's about a unit operating under a system that condones violence, erases accountability, and punishes whistleblowers." She slid the flash drive across the desk. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for time to file a formal motion to expand this case into a criminal investigation into Lieutenant Gates and his leadership. There's more. A lot more." Keller leaned back. He rubbed his eyes, thought for a long moment, then nodded. "You'll have your motion," he said, "and I'll sign whatever you put in front of me." The news broke that evening, not because Navarro called a press conference, she didn't, but because the story was too loud to stay quiet. State Attorney General-elect exposes alleged police cover-up. New evidence emerges in Fulton County trial. AG Navarro targets corrupt command. Navarro didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just went back to work. Because this wasn't the climax. It was just the opening shot. In one courtroom, 3 officers learned the hard way what it means to underestimate someone with real power. But outside that courtroom, a much bigger storm was brewing, one that would challenge the entire department, shake political alliances, and force a city to decide what kind of justice it really wanted. Elise Navarro didn't come to make speeches. She came to change everything. And this was just the beginning. If this story gripped you even half as hard as it hit them, subscribe. Because more stories like this are coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.